Captain Crush works great until it doesn't. I'm going to show you how to take it apart, put it back together, and make it work just like new again. Stay tuned and find out how. Hello everyone, Coach Chris here with WolfMoon Brewing. Today we're going to do a little bit of maintenance. We're going to take my Captain Crush mill and we're going to take it apart, clean it up, and put some lubricant on it so that it works good as new. Try to do this maintenance about once a year, maybe every 18 months, depending on how often I brew. Last time I did this was last summer, so I'm probably around 14, 15 months, so it's probably overdue. First thing, just so that we're all on the same page, when I'm talking about the front of the mill, I'm talking about this side of the mill, where the label of the Captain Crunch and where the big part of the base is. That will also indicate that this is the left side and that this is the right side. That'll come into play when we take it apart and try to put it back together. First thing we need to do is take all the plastic components off. That includes the hopper on the top, the base, the front plate, and the back plate. Just a Phillips head screwdriver. You can use a drill if you want. I prefer just to do it by hand. So I'm going to take everything apart and we'll be right back. All right, we've taken all the plastic pieces off. Now, just so you know, all the screws that held them all in are exactly the same, so you don't have to try to keep them separated. Just remember that you have a screw, a lock washer, and then a flat washer, and they go in that order. Okay, while I was taking it apart, some grain dust came off that's wedged into the pieces and all the corners and everything. So that's normal if that happens for you. And that's part of the reason that we're going to take this apart and clean it today, is to make sure we get rid of all that grain dust so it doesn't keep building up and cause an issue. The other thing that I like to do is on the sides, I label left and right side, and I also identify my normal settings for the mill. I normally set mine on 4 and 2, and I've identified that. And all I use to do that is just a Sharpie, or you can use a paint marker, whatever works for you. Sharpie will work fairly well for a good long time. Paint marker will last a little bit longer. Now that we've got all the plastic pieces off, now we need to take the actual mill apart. To do that, there's a couple of set screws that we need to remove. On the front and the back of the mill, you'll notice that there's 4 screw holes, and that's where the plastic gets on. And then there's another 2 sets of screws, or 2 sets of holes. And in those holes are your 2 set screws. It should be a 3mm hex wrench. Just go ahead and put that in there and remove your set screws. Now these set screws are kind of special. Let me get this one out. They're stainless. And I know you probably can't see this, and I'll try to get you a close-up. They're stainless, and on the tip, there's a ball, and that ball, it rides on a spring so that you can depress that ball in and lock in your mill and have that adjustability on the mill. Now, since 90% of the time when I'm using my mill, I'm using the same settings, so I crank this down a little bit harder than suggested, just to make sure that I'm always locked into position. You do have the opportunity to back that screw off just a little bit, and it'll give you your mill the ability to adjust it to fine-tune your settings. There's little dimples on the wheel itself, and when you take it apart, you'll see that, and that's what that ball on the end of the set screw will lock into. When I first got this mill, I had an issue with it, and I didn't know what it was. When I was using the mill, after I was done using it for the day, I would spray it down to rinse it off, and then I would let it air dry and I'd put it away. While I was doing that, I didn't realize that these set screws, even though they're supposed to be stainless steel, were slowly starting to rust. And as they rusted, they weren't holding the wheel into the right position every time. So I reached out to Northern Brewer, told them what was going on, and they were kind enough that they sent me a whole new set of set screws. When I got the new set screws, I took a look at them, measured them out, and I found out what the measurement was and found them online at Amazon, so I always have an extra set. I'll link down below what the size is, so if you'd like to get an extra set, you can. Now, to avoid that problem in the future, since that point in time, I've only cleaned this off with an air compressor, and I've never used water to wash it down or wipe it down when I'm done. That has allowed me, and I know you probably can't see it, but this set screw looks pretty much brand new. Also, I've used some lubricant, and we'll show that here in a minute when I go to put it back together, and that has helped as well. So go ahead and remove all 4 of your set screws, and then you should be able to take your mill apart. I'll be right back once my set screws are out. All right, all my set screws are out, and in looking at them, they all look really good. They're nice and clean. There's no rust showing on any of them. I do notice that one of them, the ball doesn't seem to be all the way out. It almost seems to be stuck in a depressed position. So I'm going to replace that one just because I'm a little OCD and I just like to have everything working as well as I can. Okay, so those 3 I'm going to have to the side, and I'm going to pull one from my bag of extras here in a second. Now, to take this apart the rest of the way, it's really simple. Lift up and just take the plate off the side. Now, I try to wiggle out the knobs so that they don't fall on me. And hold on to your 3 mills. So there's one plate. Those are the 2 knobs that I was talking about. Now you've got your 3 mills. 1, 2, and your 3rd one. Now 2 of them are identical. They have very short nubs on both sides. And the 3rd wheel has an extension on it. And this is the extension where the drill gets attached to turn your mill. Okay, now that it's all apart, I'm going to take the last 2 end caps off of my plate. And that one's really stuck. There we go. So now I've got my 2 end plates. Everything else is apart. The other thing you'll notice that on your adjusting wheels, they'll have an L and an R so that you know which side it goes on. That's another advantage of marking your plate so that your left and your right always stay together. All right, now that everything's apart, it's time to clean everything. To clean it, I'm just going to rinse everything off. I'm going to wipe everything down with a dry cloth and make sure everything is clean and dry. I'll inspect everything, make sure there's no rust spots, make sure there's no huge gouges, make sure nothing appears to be wrong. If there are, this is the opportune time to take care of that. Once everything's cleaned and dried and inspected, then I'm going to give everything a quick little spray of food-grade silicone spray. I'll put a link down below where you can get this. That just makes putting this back together a little bit easier. So give me a few minutes and I'll be right back once everything has been cleaned and I've sprayed it with some lubricant. All right, everything's been cleaned off and I've given it a little bit of the spray of the silicone spray. Couple of quick tips that I forgot to mention. While you're cleaning out the knobs, this small part, the hole in the center, if you're having problems cleaning that out, take your 3mm hex wrench that you use to take the set screws out, wrap it in a paper towel and wipe it on the inside. That'll help get rid of anything that's in the inside of there. The other quick thing is if you're having problems getting rid of something and need a little help, stiff nylon brush works really well. This one's a dual. I did not use the brass. I don't like using the brass on it. I don't want to scratch anything. But the stiff wire or the stiff nylon brush works really well. Also take the opportunity, if while you were doing any of this work, your numbers or your identification of left and right came off, remark those with your Sharpie or with your paint pen. So the last thing that we need to do before we start putting it back together is to add a little bit of synthetic food grade grease. This is a CRC product. It comes in this big tube. Unfortunately, the bottom of it got a little smashed during shipping. I'll link below where I got this on Amazon, but it does have a top that you can take off. And then there's usually a little seal on the inside, but then you can just put your finger in here, get a little bit out, and dab it on where the components need to be. So like I said, the bottom's a little smashed, so it won't stand, so that's why I have it in this bucket over here. What you're going to want to put that on is inside, put a nice little thin layer on all 3 holes on your side plates, on both of them. you're going to want to put a little bit inside the hole on all of the knobs, and then a little bit on both sides of each grinding wheel or each mill wheel, just to give it a nice thin coat. That will help keep this lubricated and moving nice and smoothly for the next 12 to 18 months while you're using it. So I'm going to take care of that, and I'll be right back. Again, you don't want to put a lot on, just a nice little thin layer on the face of the milling wheel and on the little nub on both sides. For the little wheels or for the adjusting knobs, again, a little trick, use your 3mm wrench, put a little dab in the center and then wipe it around on the inside. I always take a little bit more and just scrape it onto the inside. When we're all done, we're going to spin everything and make sure that we've got a nice layer all the way on all the internal components. Same with the inside on the small hole on your side plates. Okay, now that everything's been lubricated, now you're going to want to take either your left or right plate, it doesn't matter, and take the two knobs that line up with it. So I have my right plate and I have my right knob. This one is on the number 4, and there's my number 4 up there. And then that just drops in from the inside into the slot. And then number 2 for the right side, same thing. Okay, now they're in position. And then we're going to do the same with the left side. This is where it's going to get a little tricky to do, and sometimes I wish I had a third hand. I'm sure that there's an easier way to do this, but take all 3 of your mill wheels, place them onto one of your side plates, take the other side plate, slide it on, and then lay it down on your table. At that point, then you can put in your 2 set screws for whatever side is up, flip it 180 degrees, put your 2 set screws in for that side. Once you've gotten your set screws in, then you can screw in either your front or your back plate, whichever side you happen to be on at the time. The mill wheel with a long piece on it, that's where your drill goes. And that is the one that goes, that side goes on the left, on your left plate. Okay? All right. Wasn't too bad. Just a little wiggle. Okay, now we're going to take one of the new set screws. Remember in the beginning I said that one of them seemed to be a little bad and I was going to replace it. And one of the old ones, we're going to screw that into the correct location. Just snug them down, don't go crazy. Now flip it 180 degrees, so now we're on the other side, and then take your other 2 set screws and put those in the correct locations. All right, now that they're snugged down, again, they're not super tight, they're just snug to hold everything in place. We'll adjust it once we're all put back together. Now, your 2 front and back plate, they are slightly different, so make sure that when you line up the holes, that all 6 holes on both sides line up. I grabbed the wrong one. There we go. Then take 4 of your original screws, or 4 of the Phillips head screws. Just snug those down by hand. Again, flip 180 degrees, so now you're back to the first side that you were working on. Line up your plate and put 4 screws in it. Again, just finger tight for now. And remember, the flat washer goes against the piece of plastic. The lock washer goes against the head of the screw. Okay? Now that we've got it all basically back together, all that's left is to put the base on and the top on, tighten everything down, and then adjust the set screws to make sure that everything moves like it should. So I'm going to put that all back together, and we'll be right back. All right, everything's put back together. Now remember, when tightening these screws, you are working on plastic, so you don't want to over torque them. just snug them up. It really doesn't need a lot of torque to hold on to them. Don't gorilla tight them because you'll end up breaking the plastic, and then then you just got a bigger problem. To make sure that you've got your orientation correct, I'm going to turn this to the side. This is the left side. Go back to the beginning if you're not exactly sure, but this is the left side. The Captain Crush logo is pointing towards the front. The bigger part of the base, or the longer part of the base, is pointed towards the front. And the important part, and I'll tell you why in a second, where you attach your drill is towards the back. Now, you can put this back together backwards. I've done it, and it still will work, but it is a pain. So that's why I label everything. If you've put it together backwards and everything appears to be working fine, you'll notice that where the drill attaches will be more towards the front. If it's towards the front, the mill will still work, but the only way you're going to be able to get the mill to work is if you put your drill into reverse, so that the mill spins this way, in the way it's currently oriented, to pull the grain down. Now, with this one being in the back, that wheel turns this way, which is in the forward direction for a drill, and will pull the grain into the mill. So just be careful of that. I have done that in the past, and instead of taking it all apart and putting it back together, I just left it the way it was and just knew that I had to put my drill in reverse until I took it apart and cleaned it up again. So once I did that, that's when I labeled things left and right, and that's why I give you that tip, so that you don't make the same mistake that I did. Now, just like when you first got the mill, it's going to tell you to adjust your set screws and adjust your fittings or adjust your settings to what you prefer. Again, I've set mine for 4 and 2. That means the 4th smallest and the 2nd smallest setting. That's where it works for me. Whatever works for you. So back off your set screws a little bit so that you can easily turn the knob, set it to your desired location, turn that set screw back in. Don't crank it down too tight if you want to be able to adjust it. If you like the setting that you're at, and if you're like me and you use the same setting most of the time, you can crank down that set screw. So I'm going to show you how to adjust it. It's really simple. You just take your Allen wrench, put it in the hole. For this one, it's in the front above the top screw. Loosen that just a little bit, and then turn this knob to whatever setting that you want. I'm going to set it to number 4. Just make sure that both the left and the right side are set to the same so your mill isn't off a little bit. Okay, make sure they're where they're at, and then go ahead and tighten that set screw. And you'll do the same for the bottom one. This time the access to that port is in the back, in between the two Phillips head screws. So go ahead again, loosen it up a little, turn it to where you like it. And that's why I like putting a little black mark inside where I normally set it at, and then turn down the set screw. You'll notice the way I'm tightening them, I'm only using the really short end of the Allen wrench to put some torque on it because I don't want to over torque it, and that makes sure that I don't crank it down too tight. Now I'm just going to go get a drill and we're going to test this out. I'll be right back. All right, so take your drill, corded or cordless. I'm just using a cordless just to make it easier for you guys to see. Depends on what I'm doing. If I have a lot of mill to grain, I'll plug in my corded drill. If it's a small batch, I'll use a cordless. Make sure if your drill has a hammer setting to turn off the hammer setting. If it has a clutch on it, put the clutch to the maximum setting just so you avoid any issues. So go ahead and just attach it to your mill. Tighten down the chuck. And turn the drill on and make sure that that wheel does spin. And it does. Felt nice and smooth, didn't feel like it was binding anywhere, so we're good to go. The true test is when you go to mill your first batch of grain. I always take about a half a pound of some base malt, run it through just to make sure that everything appears okay, make sure that I didn't put something together wrong, and then I toss that grain. That also, if there was any lubricant left on the wheels, that grain will grab that lubricant and kind of push it through, so I don't have that lubrication in my first batch. Even though it's food grade and food safe, I just try to err on the side of caution just to make sure. So there you go. Pretty simple process to take it apart, clean it up, lubricate it, put it back together, and test it to make sure everything's working well. I recommend you do this every 12 months, 18 months, depends on how often you use it. Really appreciate all the support that everybody's been giving me. If you'd like to show some additional support, go ahead and check down in the description where there'll be a link where you can get sweatshirts, t-shirts, and other items that have my logo on them. I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch my video today. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell to be notified the next time I post a video. And while you're down there, smash the thumbs up button for a like. Remember, home brewing is really fun, but so is drinking responsibly. I'm Coach Chris, and I'll see you next brew.